Yesterday, I posted a video about the 5 reasons why you should never take a Waymo. That video is meant to be very pessimistic, very negative, talking all about the negative and devil's advocate perspectives of taking Waymo. So of course, I like to be transparent in all my videos. So on the flip side, I'm now in this video going to talk about all the positives. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 reasons why you should always take a Waymo. Number 1. Safety. Now this is interesting because in the last video I talked about how safety was a bit of a negative aspect when it comes to Waymos. But if you look at the big picture perspective, I'm gonna be honest, Waymos are way safer than taking a taxi, Uber, Lyft, etc. There's been a lot of studies to show, and I hate to say it, there's about maybe between 1 million and 2 million rides happening every month with Waymo. I'm just gonna say millions of rides. And through all the analysis, they have found that Waymos are, statistically speaking, have less traffic violations, less accidents, and less injuries related to those accidents. I hate to say it, and it stinks to say, especially as a former Uber and Lyft driver, but it's true. Being in a Waymo is way safer than being with a human overall. And I would not be surprised, a bit harsh, a bit of like a Black Mirror style thinking, but in the next 10 or 20 years, I wouldn't be surprised if someone says, like, wait, you're gonna get in a human car? You trust a human driver? Why not just take this Waymo? Why not just take a Zoox, which is another self-driving car? We'll talk about that a little bit later in this video. Why not take X, Y, or Z that's human or AI? It's way safer. A big analogy I've used a lot on this channel is, would you trust a human doing, like, say, a complex math equation with a piece of paper and a pencil? Or would you trust a calculator more? Everybody in this day and age would trust a calculator. It's safer, more accurate, etc., etc. Same thing when it comes to Waymo. And it's really unfortunate to say, but when it comes to just pure safety for you, your friends, family, and just the general public, Waymo already has been shown to be safer. Number 2, the price. It's kind of funny because on the last video, the first 2 things I mentioned about reasons why you shouldn't take a Waymo was the safety and the price. Because here's the interesting thing about price I'm going to say. It is true that when it comes to OB, and I've mentioned this in a lot of videos, they have shown that taking a Waymo is, statistically speaking, when they did that study, more expensive. It goes Waymo, then Uber, then Lyft, that on average, Waymo will be your most expensive option. But 2 really interesting things are happening. One, as OB has demonstrated, people are still preferring a Waymo for a lot of reasons, a lot of the reasons I am talking about in this video. People are still preferring the Waymo, even if it happens to be more expensive. You have the entire thing to yourself, you can bump the music as loud as you want, all the advantages of taking a Waymo. With the second big thing, which I think is really interesting, is, well, yes, maybe when they did that study, statistically speaking, Waymo's more expensive. And maybe that's true on average. I've been noticing in my own personal life, taking Waymos a lot here in LA, that a lot of times, for the name of science, for videos like this, I'll pull up Waymo, pull up Uber, pull up Lyft. I'll just kind of look at the prices. Even if sometimes I'm not going out, I'll just be like, hey, I'm just kind of curious to see what the price looks like. And I gotta be honest, about close to 50% of the time, if I had to be very specific, I'd guess about 40% of the time, Waymo is gonna be cheaper. 60% of the time, Uber and Lyft is gonna be cheaper. So you're talking about an almost 50-50 shot, almost a coin flip that for a lot of people they're saying, oh, wait a minute. Before it was like, all right, I want to take the Waymo. I know it's more expensive, but all right, I'll take the Waymo. But now I've seen Waymo get cheaper and cheaper. I would not be surprised that by the beginning of 2026, Waymo gets, statistically speaking, more cheaper on average every time you go to order a ride. Waymo's growing substantially, and for a lot of people, let's be honest, for a lot of people in this economy right now, how much they're spending is the biggest thing. How much is my wallet gonna hurt from this ride? One other thing I've noticed, again, this is a personal thing in my own personal life, taking Waymos, Ubers, and Lyfts, is I've noticed the longer the ride, the cheaper the Waymo tends to be compared to Uber and Lyft, which I think is interesting because I did talk about this in the past video, that one negative aspect of Waymos, which I do think is temporary, hate to say it, is Waymos right now cannot go on the highway. I think that will definitely change next year. They're definitely working on it and figuring it out. As you can imagine, a bit more high stakes being on the highway. But the big thing is when it comes to taking a Waymo, it is almost always going to be longer. Because 1, it can't go on the highway. And 2, it drives very safe. It drives almost sometimes annoyingly safe, if I'd word it like that. Like, annoyingly safe. But here's the thing. Even though Waymo might take longer to get you there, one analogy I used or example is one ride that I took recently. It would typically take about 30-ish minutes, give or take. It took close to an hour. almost double the time. But it was, I think, $10 or $20 cheaper than an Uber Lyft. Because if you think about it, the big thing for Uber Lyft, when it comes to the pricing, if you look at surge pricing, meaning you're in a big moment, like a Friday night, Saturday night, it's a concert, whatever. What Uber Lyft does, it says, hey, to its drivers, it says, hey, we need cars on the road right now. Huge bunch of people, tons of people are ordering rides. We're going to pay you more in order to get you on the road. It's an incentive. Think of it like that. It's an incentive to get you on the road. So everyone knows when it comes to the dynamic pricing that exists with Uber and Lyft, Uber and Lyft is going to cost a little more money because a lot of people are ordering it. But that's more to get people on the road. That's the main objective of surge pricing, is to encourage more drivers to get on the road so there's rides are available for everybody. With Waymo, you just send more cars out. It's not, I think, yes, maybe there is a little more manpower that's needed or payroll, but all this leads up to one thing. Waymos are not only a lot of times cheaper, but continuing to get cheaper and cheaper. And like I said, it's very interesting for me that I've noticed the biggest thing is really long rides. If I'm doing, like, say, a 20 or 30 plus minute ride, almost always, I'm going to be honest now, maybe 75% of the time, Waymo's cheaper. For a short ride, if I'm going, like, say, 10 minutes down the road, usually Uber and Lyft is cheaper. But that's a very interesting thing for me because there's a lot of people, let's be honest, who take Ubers and Lyfts pretty far. Here in LA with traffic, 20, 30 minutes is kind of like a normal commute. And when you look at a normal commute of being 30 minutes, and when you look at the fact that, like, say, a longer ride tends to be cheaper with Waymo, things are getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And a lot of people are saying, wait a minute, I was going to take the Waymo anyway, but you're telling me it's cheaper. And even so for other people. Other people were very, money focused, who are like, hey, I'm not going to lie, I need to save as much money as I can. Funds are tight. Of course, people are just trying to make ends meet right now. It's a very tough time in the economy. If Waymo's going to be cheaper, it's going to be cheaper and they're going to take it. And it's getting cheaper and cheaper every single day. Number 3, feature control. I think this is a big one for a lot of people, that when you get in that Waymo, you have the full control of the vehicle without having to ask anybody. Like, there's been times where I've gotten an Uber or Lyft, and I'm not joking. I've had my friends texting me like, hey, I feel kind of awkward. Can you just ask the guy or the girl to turn up the AC or to turn down the heat? Is that okay? And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. Because I used to drive for Uber and Lyft, they think I have I know how to talk. And I'm like, no, you just say, hey, do you mind turning down the heat or whatever? But I do kind of get that can be a little weird. Or like say if you're in Uber or Lyft and you want to listen to music, it can be kind of frustrating if you're like, hey, do you have an aux cord? Oh, you don't. Oh, you have Bluetooth. Okay, let's pull over here. Let's try to connect Bluetooth. And I don't know why. I feel like Bluetooth, even as a musician, sometimes it just never works. I don't know why. Sometimes the Bluetooth doesn't connect. There's a security feature. You have to enter a code. Do you need to download another app and create It's frustrating. But with the Waymo, everything's already connected. I can control the temperature of the car on my phone or right there on the dashboard. I can bump the music as loud as I want without any, if I use this word, social stigma. If you want to bump an embarrassing artist, if you want to bump, I don't think this is embarrassing, but let's say you want to do a 90s throwback and you want to bump Backstreet Boys. I still think Everybody by the Backstreet Boys is the best boy band song in that era. If you had to compare like NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees, Everybody by the Backstreet Boys. So let's say you want to bump that and not be embarrassed. If you feel embarrassed, you can do that. You can also EQ the music settings on the car. I've already done a video on this channel about how to do that. You can crank up the bass, crank up the sub. You don't have to worry about a human driver, if I'd say it like that, being like, hey, sorry, you guys, this is too loud. Or whoa, you're turning up my bass too loud in my car. I'm hearing the too loud in my car. Sorry, no. Can you just turn it down a little bit? No. You can bump it as loud as you want, however you want. If you want to crank the bass, if you want to adjust the temperature, you can do all these different things. You basically have access to all these different features to customize that vehicle in terms of its internal settings, music, temperature, and more, right at your fingertips. You don't have to worry about asking somebody. And I'll say this too. There's been some times, which I will say is a bit shocking to me, where I'm in an Uber and I've said, hey, do you mind turning up the AC? Like, I'm a little hot. And the driver says, no. And then I'm like, oh, okay, wait. And a bit thrown off by that. There's been some times where I'm with people going out on Friday night and say, hey, do you mind if we connect to your car via Bluetooth? That'd be awesome. The driver goes, no, sorry, just radio. Sorry. And I'm like, okay, all right. It's kind of awkward in that situation. I've had drivers deny me adjusting the temperature when I verbally ask. Or like say one of my friends wants to listen to a particular song. I've had drivers say no to them connecting to their system because they're like, oh, it's too complicated. It's not going to work. It's only a 10-minute drive. Do you really need to listen to music? And you're like, all right, sorry, I won't play my song, right? I think that's also, I hate to say it, I think a big reason why a lot of passengers, and maybe I'll do a dedicated video about this, are kind of getting fed up with Uber and Lyft drivers. And I want to say, for me being a former Uber and Lyft driver, I always believe you paid me. I'm at your service. If you want the heat to be turned up, you got it. You want more AC? You got it. You want to connect to my car system? Boom, you got it. You want me to turn it up? Boom, you got it. You want to bump country, which I'm not the biggest fan of? You got it. I'm at your service. You're, in a sense, paying me. I mean, you're paying Uber pays me, but in a sense, you're paying me. That's how I've always believed it. And I'll say this, again, as a former driver, I've had horrible Uber and Lyft drivers. I've had really good ones too, don't get me wrong, but I've had some horrible ones where I'm almost like, dude, I'm like, I used to drive for Uber and Lyft. I get that it's not fun sometimes. There's a lot of negative aspects. People and passengers can be really annoying, but you're kind of being a bit of a jerk right now. That's the only way I can word it. And I hate to say it, I think this is a big reason among a lot of these things that I'm saying. That a lot of people are saying, wait, why deal with a potential bad Uber and Lyft driver who's rude, who's very condescending, who X, Y, or Z, all these negative things, when I can just order Waymo? Number 4, cleanliness. I gotta mention this because one thing that I think a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers don't think about is how clean their car is. This to me is ride-sharing 101, but you'd be shocked, or maybe not, of how many Ubers and Lyfts I've gotten into that the car was filthy and dirty. When it comes to Waymo, they always clean the car. They make sure it's spotless, clean, does not smell bad, etc., etc. No, of course, sometimes you might get into Waymo and it might be a little dirty. It might smell a little funky, if I'd word it like that, but usually not. I'd say 99% of the time I've gotten to Waymo, I might even say 100% of the time, the Waymo is spotless. Every single time, because when it goes back to the main area where it goes back to, it's cleaned and make sure it's like desanitized, all this kind of stuff. So both on the inside and the outside of the vehicle, the rides are always super, super clean. And when you talk to a lot of people, like, why did you give this Uber driver and Lyft driver a 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, or 1-star rating? One, were they rude? That's, I think, the biggest thing. Were they rude? Were they condescending? Were they mean to you? Were they a jerk? But the second thing is the car. Even if they're nice, if you get into a car and it smells really, really bad, or it's incredibly dirty and all this kind of stuff, you're like, oh, this is kind of weird, right? And I hate to say, I think for a lot of drivers, and I don't know why, a lot of drivers, again, for reasons I don't understand, they do not clean their car. Every single ride, when I used to drive for Uber and Lyft, I look back, be like, oh, someone left a bag of this. Someone left this one napkin. Someone left this. Someone left that. I make sure to check it. In addition, at the end of every day, I make sure to kind of clean out my car, make sure it still looks spotless, smells very good, because you can get used to your own smell, if I were like that, or your car smell very, very easily. I make sure to have a bottle of Febreze, all these kind of things. When it comes to a lot of human drivers, and this kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying before, that a lot of people are just getting fed up with Uber drivers and Lyft drivers because it seems like they just don't care. To a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, they're like, yeah, you're just another ride. Get in my car, I'll drop you off, whatever. Like, they're rude, they're jerks. The car cleanliness of anything, I think, for some people is actually a bigger issue. Like, if I had to ask you, or like say most passengers, would you rather a jerk driver who has an insanely clean car, or like say a super nice, genuine driver, but the car smells kind of bad and it's kind of dirty? I think most people would choose the former. Most people say, hey, if they're a jerk, it's still kind of annoying, but man, a dirty car, a car that smells really bad the whole way there, am I going to smell like this car after I get out? Am I going to get something on my clothes if I sit down in this car? Cleanliness is a huge issue. With Waymo, you never have to worry about it. Number 5, being alone. This one, I gotta be honest, I think for most people is the biggest reason why they choose Waymos. I'm gonna be honest. And that is being alone. The fact that you can get in the Waymo and you kind of have, if I'd word it like this, the option to be social or not, in a sense. What I mean is, if you just want to get in that Waymo and just doom scroll on your phone and just do this the whole ride, you can do that. If, let's say, you want to get on your phone and, let's say, call one of your friends, you can do that. If, let's say, you're with a group of people, you can talk and have the kind of entire car to yourself without any worry of, let's say, someone else being there, judging you, etc., etc. Because I think for a lot of people, let's say it's the early morning, you just woke up, you're rushing to work, you don't feel like talking, let's say you're not in the best mood, or let's say you're trying to wake up, you still, I think, with an Uber or Lyft, have to do that formality. And I will say most drivers with Uber and Lyft do get it. They feel you out. That's what I used to do. You get in the car, you're like, hey, good morning. You're like, good morning. How's your day going so far? Good. How about you? Good. That's it. Some people, when I used to drive, go right to their phone. I'm like, they don't want to talk. Other people would be like, so, which is the classic start to a conversation. How long have you been driving for Uber and Lyft for? Do you do anything else besides Uber and Lyft, right? These kind of cliche classic questions. And I think that, yes, sometimes it is nice. I'll say for me, I actually do maybe because I'm actually an extrovert, I do like that social interaction. But I know for a lot of people, they still have to do that formality. If they don't feel like talking, like say you're not feeling well, you're just not in the mood, like say you're on a conference call and you get in the car, you kind of do this thing to the Uber driver, Lyft driver, you have to have that kind of social, at least formality of like, hey, what's up, what's up? You still have to do the thing, if that makes sense. With Waymo, you have it all to yourself. So whether you're alone, you get in the car and you're like, hey, I have this entire thing to myself. I can bump the music as loud as I want. I can throw on some Backstreet Boys if I want. I can call my friend. I can just doom scroll. I don't have to worry about having this formality of someone else being there. In a sense, you kind of feel at least that you're by yourself, right? Which can be kind of nice for a lot of people. In addition, I think the second thing, let's say with a group of people, it is sometimes kind of nice. Remember, with a Waymo, in case you didn't know at the time of this video, 3 in the back, 1 in the front. So it's similar to an Uber or Lyft. We can only have 4 maximum. You can't do any Waymo XLs yet. They are working on a new vehicle that I believe will have more seats. We'll have to see what happens. But right now, no one can sit in the driver's seat, which makes sense. It has a steering wheel, et cetera, et cetera. So you have 4 people. And like you're with your friends, you might just want to be able to gossip, talk about whatever. Because usually what happens in most Ubers and Lyfts, and I feel like this is kind of the protocol, especially on a Friday, Saturday night, 3 going back, you always pick one friend who's usually the most social. Usually it happens to be me when I'm with my friends, and they're the designated shotgun friend. So they sit in the shotgun. They're the ones who kind of talk to the Uber driver and Lyft driver, stuff like that. Sometimes you do kind of feel separated from your friends because you're like trying to talk to the driver, but then you also are like, wait, what'd you guys say? That sounded funny. And they're like, oh, never mind. There's been like a bunch of memes about this, how like your friends are always laughing in the back, where you feel like you're like isolated up front. But in a Waymo, if like so you are that person who happens to be sitting up front, you could still turn around very easily and talk to your friends. You can still turn around, have a full-on conversation. So for a lot of people, which is an interesting one, it's almost the opposite of being alone. They feel like they're more connected with their friends because if it's for you, it's easier to talk and converse and adjust the chairs and move around in a sense. And it's easier to full-on have a conversation without having to worry about touching the driver or touching anybody because you have that entire Waymo to yourself. And I think that's the biggest reason for a lot of people who have the entire thing to yourself to talk if you want to talk, don't talk if you don't want to talk, turn up the music as loud or as quiet as you want, turn up the bass as loud as you want, or even the temperature, which is very important. If you want it to be colder than normal, hotter than normal, it's all up to you. It's your Waymo. And now a bonus reason of why you should always take a Waymo is tips. This is an interesting one as we talk about ride sharing and everything. And I do want to say, of course, when it comes to this video, compared to the last one, this video is meant to be an ultra optimistic or positive aspect, talking about all the benefits of taking Waymo. The last video I posted, like I said earlier, was meant to be a very devil's advocate, ultra negative perspective of all the negatives of taking Waymo. And one thing I gotta say, love it or hate it, when it comes to Waymo, that is a positive aspect, you don't have to tip. Now, I will say as a side note, and I've said this in so many videos, and I'll say it again super fast, I do think rideshare drivers are the most under-tipped, or is the most under-tipped for profession, period, right? 2 reasons. 1, you don't have social pressure. If you're at a bar and you don't tip, they're going to give you, you're going to hear it. If you're at a restaurant with a waiter, waitress, the staff, you're going to hear it, right? Same with a lot of other professions. With an Uber or Lyft, you can just leave. And I think the second thing kind of along with that is you can tip at any time, which I think is good because I, for example, have gotten tips a half an hour later or an hour later after the ride or whatever. But on the other end, because they can tip any time, a lot of people say, which every driver in the history of Uber and Lyft has heard, oh, I'll tip you in the app. And you're like, okay. So I will say, I feel bad for a lot of Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. A lot of times they don't get the tips they deserve, and I do think they should be tipped. When it comes to Waymo, though, you don't have to worry about that. So not only is a Waymo cheaper, now in my opinion, it's starting to become cheaper on average. Not fully, based off OB studies, but it's starting to get there. You also don't have to tip. This also makes it very interesting when you look at the actual math. Because let's say if I do I'm making numbers up here. Let's say I do a $20 ride with Uber, and let's say Waymo is $22. Uber's $20, Waymo's $22. Well, of course, Waymo is more expensive. I'm going to take Uber for $20. But then I'm probably going to tip. What is the average percentage when it comes to tipping? And I know tipping's gotten out of control. We can all agree there. When it comes to tipping, on average, people tip 20%. So that $20 ride with Uber now just turned into $24. But if I take that Waymo at $22, yeah, maybe it's more expensive at first, but I don't tip. So actually, at the end of the day, the bottom line is that Waymo actually is cheaper at the end of the day. Now, of course, I could just not tip my Uber driver, but, again, just to use pure math, you don't have to tip when it comes to Waymo. It would be weird if they did add that. I would be so curious. I feel like there would be a massive backlash. As far as I know, I don't think there's been any like AI or robots ever asking for tips, which would be very bizarre. That would be like an aggressive Black Mirror style thinking. You never know, right? But as far as I know right now, of course, there's no tipping with Waymos. I don't think they'd ever do that or roll that out. But that's a big benefit for a lot of people. And it has been the case with a lot of people. And I've had it happen to me when it comes to Uber drivers and Lyft drivers that I always tip. I've always been a big tipper. I used to drive for Uber and Lyft. I also used to be a bartender. So I think if you've worked in any kind of service industry, whether it's being a waiter or waitress, the staff, let's say at a restaurant, being a transportation driver, whether it's ride sharing or something else, you always tip. I've always been a big tipper. But it also kind of bothers me when, let's say, I get into an Uber or Lyft and a driver said, halfway through, the driver says, hey, by the way, don't forget to tip. And I'm like, I know. Or they'll point to a sign like, hey, don't forget tips. Or another time that happened to me, and this really bothered me, and I hate to say it, I didn't tip the guy, is I was doing a decently long ride in LA during peak of traffic. It was like the worst time to drive. It was from like Marina Del Rey to like the tip of Hollywood during like 5 or 6 p.m. It was the worst time you could possibly drive in LA, taking the worst route. It's only back roads really to get there. And it was like a 45-minute drive and bumper to bumper traffic. It was just an annoying ride. I remember I got in the ride, and I'm always polite. I would say, thank you so much for driving. I appreciate it. And the guy goes, yeah, man, you picked a bad time to order this ride. And I remember thinking like, all right, that's a weird way to start off the conversation, one. But two, I'm like, you accepted the ride. You could just not accept the ride. Like, I'm not forcing you to do this ride, right? Like, I ordered the ride, and you're the one who picked us up. And then we started driving, and about 20 minutes in, again, just to be polite, say, hey, man, I know this is kind of annoying, a lot of traffic right now, but I really, I appreciate you picking us up. It means a lot. I'm trying to be polite, because I used to drive for Uber and Lyft. And the guy literally looks at me in the rearview mirror and goes, hey, man, well, don't worry about it. I mean, you're going to give me a really good tip, right? So, of course, no problem. And when he said that, I'm like, you're not going to get a tip at all. I'm like, I think I gave him 1 star too, because to me, that was like one ultra rude right in the beginning, that the first thing he says to me is he got mad at me for how bad the ride's going to be. And like, you accepted it. You didn't have to accept it. Also, you didn't even have to drive for Uber and Lyft. Like, no one's forcing you. Like, I'm just another person ordering a ride. I could have gotten another driver. But two, I think kind of telling me that, oh, by the way, you're going to give me a good tip. So therefore, I'm going to do this ride for you. And I'm assuming you're going to give me a good tip. No. I'll be honest. And again, it sucks because I used to be an Uber driver and Lyft driver, used to bartend. I've always been a big tipper. And if he didn't say that, I would have definitely tipped him 20%, maybe even a little bit more, because I get that it's a pretty bad ride. And I've tipped some drivers. I remember one driver I had in Denver, Colorado. I tipped him $50 in cash because he was a great driver. He got me there super fast. I was going to an event. I was running late, but he like hooked it up. He was, driving a little too fast in some cases, but he got me there. $50 in cash, I tipped him. I've always been a big tipper. But it's annoying, though, when it comes to, like, say, that ride that I just mentioned, that the guy's going to be, already some hate making sure that I tipped him. And it's one of those situations where I'm like, you know what? Hate to say it. If I took a Waymo, one, I wouldn't have to worry about this tipping situation. But two, I wouldn't have to worry about a really rude and negative driver.